Ladies and gentlemen, let me start with a question that may hit close to home. Are you tired? I'm not just talking about physical tiredness, the kind that sleep can fix. I'm talking about the kind of tired that lives deep in your bones, the kind of tired that sleep can't touch, the kind that creeps into your spirit, where even on your best day it still feels like something's missing. You pray, but you worry. You try harder, but nothing feels enough. You're carrying the weight of your world and wonder why your knees are buckling. Let me be real with you today. You're tired because you haven't let God take control. We live in a world that worships hustle. It praises self-made stories and DIY faith. But let me remind you, family, you weren't made to carry everything. In Matthew 11:28, Jesus gives an invitation. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Notice he didn't say, come to me when you've fixed yourself, or come to me once you've got it all figured out. No, he says, come to me as you are, tired, broken, burdened, and I'll give you rest. But here's the problem. We hear that verse, and then we keep pushing. We say, God, I trust you, but we still white-knuckle the steering wheel of our lives. We sing, I surrender all, but we give God only what we're comfortable letting go. There comes a point in every person's life when they feel utterly drained, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, even physically. It may not come from a single dramatic event. Sometimes it's the quiet weariness that builds up from trying to handle too much for too long. We keep saying, I've got this, while silently drowning under the weight of our responsibilities. We try to hold families together, chase careers, fix relationships, make the right decisions, plan our futures, and be strong for everyone around us. But slowly and surely we wear out. We become spiritually fatigued, disconnected from peace, and overwhelmed by anxiety. Why? Because we've been trying to do everything in our own strength. This is the core of the problem. Self-reliance. Now, self-reliance isn't always bad. Being responsible and hardworking is important. God calls us to be good stewards of our time, gifts, and lives. But self-reliance becomes dangerous when we begin to live as if we are the source of our own strength. That's when self-reliance turns into spiritual pride. We start saying with our actions, if not our words, I can handle this without God. But we were never designed to be our own source. We weren't created to carry the full weight of life alone. And the exhaustion we feel is a direct result of trying to live outside the way God designed us. In John 15:5, Jesus gives us a powerful image to illustrate our dependence on Him. He says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. The branch doesn't produce fruit on its own. It draws all its nourishment, strength, and vitality from the vine. The moment the branch becomes disconnected, it withers. It doesn't matter how hard it tries, without the vine, it dies. That's us when we live without daily dependence on God. We can try to push through on willpower. We can try to mask our fatigue with distractions, achievements, or even religious busyness. But none of that will replace the life-giving connection to God. Our own strength always runs out. That's why Isaiah 40:30-31 says, even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. Did you catch that? Even the strongest among us, youths full of energy, will wait out. But those who hope in the Lord, those who wait on Him, will find a supernatural strength that doesn't make sense by human standards. We're often tired because we've confused trusting God with merely acknowledging Him. Many Christians say they trust God, but in practice, they live like they don't. We make plans without praying. We make decisions based on what we think is best, not what God is leading us to do. We try to fix problems that we never brought to Him in the first place. Then we wonder why things feel heavy, why peace is so elusive, why we're so tired. Here's the hard truth. God will let you run on empty if it brings you back to Him. Not out of cruelty, but because He knows only in Him will you find real strength and real rest. Sometimes fatigue is not just a physical condition, it's a spiritual signal, a divine whisper that says, come back. You're not supposed to do this alone. One of the great dangers of modern life is that we are constantly praised for independence. From a young age, we're taught to be strong, to figure things out for ourselves, to not rely on anyone. But spiritual maturity is not about becoming more independent. It's about becoming more dependent on God. The deeper your walk with Him, the more you realize how much you need Him for everything, from daily decisions to deep healing. And here's the beauty of it. God wants to carry what you've been dragging. He wants to lift the burden of trying to be strong all the time. In Corinthians 12:9, God says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Paul responds by saying, therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. Think about that. Paul wasn't ashamed of his weakness. He embraced it. Because it meant he was relying on Christ. He embraced it because it meant he was relying on Christ. It meant God's power had room to operate. When we pretend to be strong, we block the flow of divine strength in our lives. But when we admit we're tired, when we confess our need for help, that's when God steps in and does what only He can do. And God's strength isn't just enough. It's abundant. It's sustaining. It fills you in a way no human solution ever could. When we move from self-reliance to God-reliance, we don't just avoid burnout, we begin to thrive in the middle of pressure. When we move from self-reliance to God-reliance, we begin to thrive in the middle of pressure. We're no longer shaken by every storm or setback because we know the one holding us is unshakable. So if you find yourself tired, truly tired, maybe it's time to stop striving and start surrendering. Maybe God isn't asking you to push harder. Maybe He's asking you to trust deeper. Start your day not with a checklist, but with a prayer. Before making decisions, ask God for wisdom. When anxiety creeps in, pause and remind yourself, I'm not in this alone. Make room in your life not just for God to be present, but for Him to be in charge. Because the truth is simple. You don't need more hustle. You need more Him. Self-reliance will keep draining you. But God-reliance, that's where the true, lasting, soul-deep strength comes from. And when you live from that place, You'll face them empowered. You'll walk in peace, not panic. And you'll finally breathe again, because the weight you've been carrying has been placed into the only hands strong enough to hold it all. There's a quiet truth that most of us avoid, not because we don't believe it, but because we're afraid of what it demands. It's the truth that rest doesn't come from doing more, it comes from surrendering more. That word surrender can make people uneasy. It sounds like weakness, like giving up. We live in a culture that celebrates winners, fighters, go-getters, people who take control and never stop pushing forward. So the idea of surrender feels backward. But in God's kingdom, it's different. In God's kingdom, surrender isn't failure. It's the beginning of real strength, peace, and deep rest for the soul. Many of us are tired, not just physically, but spiritually and emotionally, because we're resisting surrender. We're clinging to control, trying to manage every outcome, every relationship, every crisis, and every plan. And in doing so, we've placed ourselves in the role of God without realizing it. We may pray, but in our hearts, we're still holding the steering wheel. We ask for help, but then try to carry it all anyway. That's not surrender, that's lip service to trust, not the reality of it. Jesus gives us an open invitation. In Matthew 11:28-30, he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." The promise is rest. But notice the condition. We have to come to him. We have to take his yoke upon us. We have to learn from him. That requires humility. That requires surrender. You can't take his yoke if you're still trying to wear your own. The tiredness many of us feel is the exhaustion of a heart at war, a heart that wants God's peace, but is still fighting for personal control. You want God to lead, but only if he goes where you were already planning to go. You want to trust him with your future, but you're still building backup plans in case he doesn't come through the way you hope. You say your will be done, but you mean your will as long as it matches mine. That kind of internal tension will wear you out. It creates spiritual anxiety, and it robs you of the rest Jesus promised. Surrender is not passive. It's active trust. It's waking up in the morning and saying, "God, whatever happens today, I'm yours. I don't need to know everything. I don't need to be in control. I just need to stay close to you." That posture of the heart is where rest begins. Not because life becomes easy, but because you're no longer bearing the weight of being your own savior. One of the greatest enemies of surrender is fear. We fear what might happen if we let go. We fear the unknown. We fear losing people, comfort, position, or plans. But at the root of all that fear is the question, is God really trustworthy? We wouldn't say it out loud, but our actions betray the doubt. Deep down, we wonder if surrendering to God will lead to disappointment. We fear that if we give God control, he might take us somewhere we don't want to go. But listen carefully. The God who invites you to surrender is not cruel. He's not careless. He's not distant. He is good and he is loving. Romans 8:28 reminds us, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." That means even when his plans are different from yours, they are always better. Surrender isn't losing, it's trading your limited understanding for his limitless wisdom. Consider Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. On the night before his crucifixion, he was overwhelmed with sorrow. He prayed, "Father, if it is possible, take this cup from me." But then came the most powerful words of surrender ever spoken. "Yet not my will, but yours be done." Jesus, fully divine, yet fully human, modeled perfect surrender in the face of suffering. And because of that surrender, salvation came to the world. There is power in surrender. There is purpose in surrender. And yes, there is rest in surrender. When you finally release control, something amazing happens. You stop striving to make everything work out perfectly. You stop obsessing over the what-ifs. You stop trying to impress God and others with your strength. And in that release, your soul breathes again. You begin to realize that the peace of God is not found in understanding everything. It's found in trusting Him through everything. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." We often rush past that verse. Be still and know that I am God. We often rush past that verse, but it's an invitation to stop, to be still, to cease striving. The Hebrew root of be still literally means let go. Let go and know that He is God. Not you, not your plans, not your expectations. He is God. And He's more than capable of handling your life. The irony is that surrender, which the world sees as weakness, actually makes you stronger. You don't become a doormat. You become deeply rooted. You discover it. You're no longer tossed around by circumstances because your foundation is not in your performance or control, but in the unshakable presence of God. That's why surrendered people often look calm in chaos. It's not because life is easy. It's because they've learned to lean on the one who holds it all. So if you're tired, if your soul feels restless, maybe it's not because you need a vacation. Maybe it's because you need to let go. Maybe you've been carrying burdens that don't belong to you. Maybe God is whispering, if you'll just surrender, I'll carry you. I'll guide you. I'll fight your battles. But He won't force it. He's waiting for you to lay it down. Surrender is not a one-time decision. It's a daily discipline. Every morning you get to choose. Will I carry today in my strength, or will I give it to God? Will I fight for control, or will I walk in trust? One leads to exhaustion, the other leads to rest. God's rest isn't found in a place. It's found in a person. And that person, Jesus, is still inviting you today, come to me. Let go. Lay it down. Life has a way of handing us more than we can handle. There are seasons when the weight of responsibilities, fears, decisions, and disappointments pile up like bricks in a backpack. And before long, we're walking through life exhausted, discouraged, and on the edge of collapse. Not necessarily because life is harder than usual, but because we're carrying burdens we were never meant to carry. Many of us are spiritually tired, not because God failed us, but because we picked up loads He never assigned to us. We worry about the future as if it's ours to control. We obsess over people's opinions as if their approval determines our worth. We try to fix problems in our strength, even when we've prayed for God's help. We carry guilt from sins we've already confessed. We try to be the Savior in everyone else's life, forgetting we're not even capable of saving ourselves. And in all of that, the weight begins to crush us, not because we're weak, but because we're carrying the wrong things. God never asked us to carry what only He can handle. In 1 Peter 5:7, we find a simple but powerful command. Cast all your anxiety on Him, because He cares for you. This is not a suggestion. It's not something we do when we've run out of other options. It is a direct invitation from God Himself to take the weight that's been breaking us and throw it onto His shoulders. Because He is able. Because He cares. But too often we carry our burdens like a badge of honor. We tell ourselves we should be able to handle it. That real strength means staying composed, keeping quiet, pushing through. It means fighting when the stone that's too heavy means too light. But too heavy means too light. But too heavy means too light. But too heavy means too light. That this word difficult means to say the weight on us. So we carry the stress of our job, the pressure of providing, the tension in our marriage, the fear for our children, the shame from our past, all in silence. We smile while we're crumbling. We function while we're bleeding inside. We go to church, raise our hands, and then go home and cry in secret. And all the while, Jesus is whispering, you were never meant to carry that. There is a reason Jesus said in Matthew 11:30, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. That doesn't mean life will always be simple or pain-free, but it does mean that when we walk with Him, we don't walk alone. The burden becomes light because He carries the weight, but we have to make the exchange. Our load for His. Our control for His peace, our anxiety for His comfort. Some of the burdens we carry are emotional. Grief, trauma, fear, and shame have deep roots. We try to suppress them, ignore them, or distract ourselves from them. And sometimes they become deep burdens. We can't push our load forever. We have to trust in God that He can be our rock for it. Some of the burdens we carry are emotional. Grief, trauma, fear, and shame have deep roots. We try to suppress them, ignore, but those wounds grow heavier over time. They manifest as depression, anger, bitterness, and burnout. And God is not indifferent to those hidden struggles. He sees them, He cares about them, He wants to heal them. But healing begins with surrender. Healing begins when we stop pretending we're okay and start handing over the pain we've buried for too long. Other times the burdens we carry are relational. We take responsibility for people's happiness, for fixing their problems, for holding everyone together. But hear this, it is not your job to be everyone's savior. That position is already filled. Yes, we are called to love one another, to support each other, to serve with compassion, but not to sacrifice our peace, our identity, or our obedience to God in the process. When you carry someone else's burden without setting boundaries or seeking God's wisdom, you begin to sink under the pressure. Helping people shouldn't come at the cost of your health or calling. And then there are burdens of control. We try to manage outcomes, control timelines, predict the future, and orchestrate life according to our preferences. But that level of control is an illusion. It drains us of joy and drowns us in worry. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds us to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your path straight. Letting go of control is not irresponsibility. It's wisdom. It's an act of trust that says, God, I don't have to see everything clearly as long as I know you're leading me. What we often forget is that holding on is sometimes more exhausting than letting go. Clinging tightly to burdens, whether it's a grudge, a fear, a toxic relationship, or an unrealistic expectation, doesn't make us strong. It makes us weary. Letting go isn't quitting. It's trusting. It's saying, God, this is too heavy for me. I place it into your hands. And here's the beautiful truth. God's hands are strong enough to hold what's crushing you. He's not overwhelmed by your mess. He's not surprised by your struggle. In fact, He invites it. Psalm 55:22 says, cast your cares on the Lord and He will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. That's a promise. Not only will He take your burden, He will sustain you. He will hold you steady when everything around you is shaking. There's a story in the Old Testament that illustrates this. In Exodus 18, Moses was trying to lead the entire nation of Israel by himself. He judged every dispute, handled every issue, and tried to be everything for everyone. But he was wearing himself out. His father-in-law Jethro noticed and said, what you are doing is not good. You will surely wear yourself out, both you and these people who are with you. In other words, Moses was carrying too much, and it wasn't sustainable. He needed to delegate, to trust others, and to recognize their limit. That same wisdom applies to us today. We can't do it all. We were never supposed to. God didn't design you to carry the burdens of life alone. He designed you to walk closely with Him, to trust Him, to lean on Him, and to let Him carry what you cannot. The more we cling to burdens, the more exhausted we become. But the moment we release them, we step into a peace that surpasses understanding. So if you're tired, really tired, ask yourself, what am I carrying that God never asked me to carry? What anxieties, expectations, or responsibilities have you taken on without inviting God into the process? What pain have you buried instead of offering it to the healer? You don't have to keep dragging that weight. There is freedom in laying it down. There is rest in His presence. Let today be the day you stop trying to be strong on your own. Let today be the day you bring your burdens to the foot of the cross and leave them there. Because the truth is, God never meant for you to carry it all, but He did mean for you to carry it to Him. One of the most difficult things in our walk with God is waiting. We say we trust Him, we say we've surrendered, but when the answer doesn't come fast enough or the door doesn't open when we expect it, our faith starts to waver. We begin to doubt His goodness, His plan, and even His presence. Why? Because we're not just struggling with life. We're struggling with God's timing. God. But letting God lead means we don't just trust where He's taking us. We trust when and how He chooses to get us there. We live in a world of instant gratification, fast food, instant messaging, same-day delivery. Everything is now, now, now. So when God says wait, it can feel like a full-blown crisis. We interpret waiting as silence, and silence as absence. But the truth is, God is often working the most in our waiting. In God says, God is often working the most in our waiting. And what we see in God's promise to faith and silence is that wait stays with us. You see, God is often working the most in our waiting. His delays are not denials. His timing is not slow, it's intentional. Every season has its purpose. Every pause has its lesson. When God leads, He does so according to His perfect timing, not our impatient clocks. Think of Abraham. God promised him a son, but decades passed before that promise was fulfilled. In the waiting, Abraham and Sarah tried to take matters into their own hands, and Ishmael was born. That decision, made out of impatience, caused generational consequences. But when Isaac finally arrived, he came not by human effort, but by God's divine promise, fulfilled in God's time. If Abraham had trusted not just God's word, but God's timeline, he might have spared himself and his family a great deal of heartache. We often do the same. We hear a promise or feel a calling, and when the outcome takes longer than expected, we rush the process. Promise. Very problem. 52, 52, 52, 52, 52, 52, 52, 52, 52, 52, 52. We try to manipulate circumstances, force relationships, or cut corners. We try to help God along. But the moment we start pushing ahead of Him, we step out of alignment with His will. And that's when things get heavy. That's when we start feeling anxious, confused, and tired. Because we've moved ahead without the grace that only flows when we walk with God, not ahead of Him. Letting God lead also means trusting His direction, not just His pace. Sometimes God takes us the long way around. Sometimes He leads us into wilderness places before taking us to the promised land. Sometimes He closes doors we thought He had opened. But that doesn't mean He's lost or that we've failed. It means He sees the whole picture while we only see a sliver. The Israelites experienced this firsthand after leaving Egypt. God didn't take them on the shortest route to Canaan, even though it was available. But He promised it took them on the shortest route to Canaan, even though it was available. Exodus 13:17-18 tells us, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. For God said, if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the desert road toward the Red Sea. Why? Because God knew what they couldn't see. He was protecting them, preparing them, and teaching them to trust Him. Not just His promises, but His path. The same applies to us. Sometimes the route God takes us on doesn't make sense. It feels longer, harder, and more confusing than what we had imagined. But faith means trusting that He knows what He's doing. He sees every detour, every delay, every closed door as part of the journey, not as obstacles, but as divine appointments. He is not wasting time. He is shaping you. But what happens when we don't understand the direction at all? What if the place God is leading us looks like a dead end? That's when we remember that obedience isn't about understanding, it's about trust. Proverbs 16:9 reminds us, in their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. You might have a plan, a dream, or a destination in mind, but it is God who determines the way you get there. And sometimes He'll take you through valleys before He brings you to the mountaintop. The temptation in confusing seasons is to retreat, to go back to what feels comfortable and familiar. But comfort is not always safe. The Israelites constantly wanted to return to Egypt, to bondage, because the wilderness felt too uncertain. But they would have missed their destiny if they had gone back. Sometimes you have to sit with the discomfort of not knowing and still move forward in faith. Letting God lead also requires humility. You have to admit that you don't have all the answers. You have to be willing to let go of your own timeline, your own logic, your own pride. That's not easy, especially when others are moving faster, when everyone else seems to be getting ahead, when your progress feels invisible. But remember this, God's path for you is uniquely designed. You're not behind. You're not behind. You're not forgotten. You're being prepared. Isaiah 55:8-9 reminds us, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. That's not just poetry, it's perspective. When things don't add up, when it feels like God is late or silent, that's when we lean into His Word, into prayer, into trust. Not panic, not fear, not silence, not, there is peace in knowing that God is leading, even if we don't know where. There is rest in following, even if we can't see what's next. Faith is not a map, it's a compass that always points to Him. You may not know the entire route, but if He is leading, you can be sure you are going the right way. So what does it look like, practically, to let God lead? It looks like praying before planning. It looks like waiting when your flesh wants to rush. It looks like obeying even when it's uncomfortable. It looks like choosing peace over pressure, presence over performance. It means staying close enough to God that when He says move, you move. And when He says wait, you wait. It means you let go of the illusion that you are in control and instead embrace the reality that you are deeply loved by the one who is. If you are tired, if your soul feels heavy, maybe it's not because the journey is too hard. Maybe it's because you've been trying to lead instead of follow. Maybe it's time to release your grip on the outcome and say, God, I trust you, even when I don't see it, even when I don't understand it. Lead me, and I will follow. Because when you truly let God lead, in timing, in direction, in every detail, you will find what your soul has been longing for all along: peace, rest, and purpose. For you will find what your soul has been longing for all along: peace, rest, and purpose.